Welcome to the Allison Knows podcast. You know, biblical stewardship is something that I've been giving a lot of thought to lately, and it seems like you guys have too, because I have gotten so many questions about it. It's one of those topics that goes way deeper than just finances.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
really gets at how we view everything in our lives.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating is that the sources you've gathered, study guides, notes, even a whole ebook chapter, all point to this idea that stewardship, it's not just about money, it's like this overarching way of living.
Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves,
hmm
how would you even sum up what biblical stewardship actually is?
You know, it's funny, a lot of times people, when they think of stewardship, they immediately jump to money. But imagine for a second, instead of thinking of yourself as the owner of everything, you have your time, your talents, your possessions. What if you shifted your perspective to see yourself as a manager?
Okay, I'm manager.
Yeah, like ultimately, it all belongs to God, and we're entrusted with taking care of it all.
That's a really powerful shift in thinking. It makes you realize that the Bible is full of stories about stewardship, right? From the very beginning, even.
Oh, absolutely. Genesis 1:28, that's a classic example. It talks about, God giving humans dominion over all of creation. And that's not a license to just exploit and use things up. It's about cultivating, caring for what God has made. It's like the original job description of a steward.
The OG steward. And we see that idea echoed throughout the Old Testament too, right? Figures like Joseph and Abraham.
Oh, yeah, those guys.
They were entrusted with these incredible responsibilities,
Hmm.
managing resources, leading people.
Yeah, it was a lot more than just counting coins back then.
Exactly. It wasn't
Yeah.
about stuff. It
Yeah.
was about using what they had to serve others and ultimately to fulfill God's purposes.
And then you've got all of Jesus's parables, the parable of the talents. That's a powerful one.
Ooh, always a good one.
It's amazing how he used these stories to get people thinking about the bigger picture. Not just holding on to what we have, but investing it, multiplying it, using it to create something more.
It's a much more dynamic view of stewardship than people typically think of. Like, it's full of potential and even risk.
Exactly.
That parable always gets me thinking about, like, what hidden talents I might have. You know, if we're supposed to be multiplying them, it means we've got to go out and find them first.
Absolutely. That's where all those 7 dimensions of stewardship your sources talk about, that's where they really come in handy. It's like this framework for thinking about how stewardship goes way beyond just, your bank account.
It's a whole life thing.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's hear it. Give me the rundown on these 7 dimensions.
All right, so it's all about recognizing that every single part of who you are, what you have, it can all be stewarded well. And the first one, the one that pops up the most, is time.
Time stewardship.
Right. We've all got the same 24 hours, but how we actually spend them, that says a lot about what we really value.
And our priorities.
Totally. One of your notes mentioned this idea of choosing, quality time with your family and friends over working yourself to death. It's about making conscious choices, not just being busy for the sake of being busy.
It's about being intentional.
Yes, it's about asking yourself, am I using my time in a way that honors God, serves others, and honestly brings me genuine fulfillment?
Good questions.
And then you've got talent stewardship.
Okay, talents.
It's recognizing that all the amazing abilities you have, those gifts, they're not just for you to show off or get ahead.
Right. It's like we're meant to use them for something bigger.
Exactly.
In one of your study guides, it talked about a musician using their gift to lead worship or even just to teach music to kids.
I love that.
It's about letting your talents shine, but in a way that blesses other people.
Right. Sharing them, not hiding them away. And, stewardship is about first discovering those talents, honing them, and then actually putting them to work in a way that reflects what God cares about.
Okay, so we've got time, talents. We can't forget financial stewardship, can we? That's the one most people think of first anyway.
That's the big one for sure. But it's not just about being good at math or balancing a checkbook. It's more about aligning your money with what you truly value and then using it to actually make a difference in the world.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I was reading one of your ebook chapters, and it had this really interesting point about tithing. It was talking about how it's not about obligation, but about worship and gratitude, recognizing that everything we have ultimately comes from God.
Yeah, like an act of worship.
Exactly. And financial stewardship, it's a lot more than just that 10% too. It's about making wise choices with all of your money, budgeting responsibly, saving for the future, and using your resources to support things you believe in.
It's a whole mindset.
Exactly. It's about viewing money not as like the end goal, but as a tool.
Right. A tool to bless others and further God's kingdom. So good. If you're loving this deep dive into biblical stewardship so far, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode with your friends so they can learn all about this too. And you can also join Allison Knows on Spotify and YouTube for even more content. Okay, back to those 7 dimensions. What comes after time, talents, and finances?
Ah, yes. Well, next up, you've got environmental stewardship.
Oh, yes. The planet.
Right. This one sometimes gets overlooked, but it's really important. It's all about realizing that, we're called to care for God's creation. The earth, all its resources.
And all the creatures. I was just reading one of your notes and had this great line. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's a good reminder that we're not just here to consume, but we're also called to be caretakers.
Absolutely.
And to preserve it for the generations coming after us. So what does that look like in practical terms?
Well, it can take lots of forms, right? It can be as simple as choosing to reduce your waste in your everyday life, being mindful of your energy use, maybe supporting organizations that are fighting for environmental protection. It's really about all those little things you do consistently.
Little by little.
Yeah, and collectively they make a big difference.
Okay, so we've got time stewardship, talent stewardship, financial stewardship, and environmental stewardship. What's next?
All right, next up is relational stewardship. This one's really close to my heart. It's all about how we invest in and nurture the relationships we have.
Our relationships are so important.
Oh, they are. And yet we often take them for granted.
So true. One of your briefing documents had this powerful line about choosing to forgive, even when it's really hard.
Oh, yeah. Forgiveness.
As an act of stewardship towards our relationships. Because relationships take effort.
They really do. And relational stewardship, it's about communication. It's about forgiveness. It's about quality time. It's about showing up for people you care about.
Being present.
Yes. And recognizing that sometimes relationships, they're difficult, they're work, but they're so worth it.
Totally worth it. It's funny how we talk about investing in our finances, but we don't use that language so much with relationships. But it's true, right? They require investment, and they give amazing returns.
You said it. And that brings us to physical health stewardship.
Oh yeah, the body.
It's about seeing our bodies as gifts, as temples of the Holy Spirit. We've got a responsibility to take care of them.
I'll admit, this is the dimension I struggle with the most. It's so easy to let those healthy habits slide when life gets crazy.
I get it. But the sources you've shared, they make this really compelling case for viewing physical health as an act of worship. Like, we're honoring God with our bodies.
That's a good reframe.
It's not about vanity.
Right.
It's not about trying to achieve this perfect image.
It's about caring for this incredible gift that we've been given.
Exactly. And it makes all those healthy choices, like eating well, exercising, getting enough sleep. It makes it feel less like a chore and more like, an act of gratitude.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, what about the 7th dimension? We've got to get to that last one.
All right, the final dimension is intellectual stewardship.
The mind.
This one is often overlooked, but it's super important. It's about, using your mind, being curious, constantly learning, and then using all that knowledge for good.
For good. One of your study guides used this example of someone who's always seeking knowledge, but not just for themselves.
Oh, right.
But so that they can share it with others and make the world a better place. It's about seeing our minds as these powerful tools.
Yeah, we can use to bless others, yeah.
Exactly. So it's about being a lifelong learner, having those thoughtful conversations, reading books, going to lectures. It's really about always trying to understand the world better and then using that knowledge for good. So those are the 7 dimensions. It's such a well-rounded picture of what it means to really live out this idea of stewardship. It's not just one sliver of your life. It's everything.
And you know what's really cool? They're not actually isolated at all. They all impact each other.
Oh, I love that. Tell me more about that interconnectedness.
So think about it this way. When you're really good at stewarding your time, you're way more likely to have the energy and space to invest in your relationships.
Right. And if you're taking care of your physical health, you'll have more energy to pursue your intellectual growth.
Yes.
And use your talents to the fullest.
It all works together.
Like a tapestry.
Exactly. Each thread makes the whole thing stronger and more beautiful.
But I know what our listeners are thinking right now. 7 dimensions, all this talk about stewardship. How do we actually live this out?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? And thankfully, your sources, they actually give some really solid advice on this. They talk about 10 practical principles that can help us move from just thinking about it to taking action.
10 principles. Okay, I'm ready. Lay it on me.
Okay, so the first one, and this is really the foundation of everything, is acknowledging God's ownership. This is what shifts our perspective. Instead of seeing ourselves as the owners of everything, our time, our talents, possessions, we recognize that it all ultimately belongs to God.
We're managing it.
We're stewards, yeah.
Okay, so acknowledging God's ownership is step one. What else? What's the next principle that can help us live out biblical stewardship?
Well, the second principle, it's all about faithfulness in the small things. The sources really emphasize that stewardship isn't just about, these grand gestures. It's about being diligent, being trustworthy in all those everyday tasks, even the ones that seem insignificant.
It's those little things.
Yeah, like if you're faithful in the little things, you'll be faithful in the big things too, right? It's about developing those habits of consistency, of integrity.
Those tiny little muscles.
Yeah, those small acts of faithfulness, they add up over time.
They do.
They shape your character, they build trust, and they really show that you can be trusted to manage what's been given to you.
You're proving yourself.
Exactly. And it reminds us that stewardship isn't just about the big decisions. It's about those daily choices, even those seemingly small things, that when you do them consistently, you're cultivating a heart of faithfulness.
Okay, principle number 3. Give me the goods.
All right, it's accountability. And we've kind of touched on this a bit already, but it's worth repeating. None of us are meant to do this alone.
We need each other.
We do. It's so much easier when you've got someone walking alongside you, cheering you on, and, giving you a gentle nudge when you start veering off course.
A little nudge. I like that.
Accountability really helps you stay on track.
So how do we find that accountability?
Well, it can look like finding a mentor you trust, joining a small group, or even just having an open and honest conversation with a close friend about how you're doing with all of this.
Like they're talking about it.
Right. When you share your struggles, your victories, ask for advice, get encouragement, it really makes a huge difference.
I'm ready for principle number 4. What is it?
It is generosity. This is where the rubber really meets the road. Generosity, it's about moving past this scarcity mindset and embracing the abundance that God has given us.
It's a change in how you view things.
Totally. And when you realize that everything you have is a gift, it changes how you view what you have.
Yeah.
You're much more open to sharing freely.
Open hands.
Exactly. And generosity, it's not just about money either. It's about giving your time, your talents, anything you have that can bless someone else. One of your study guides was talking about things like, volunteering your time, offering to use your skills to help someone out, or even just being there to listen to a friend who's going through a rough time. Those are all acts of generosity.
And they can have a ripple effect.
Totally. And the best part about generosity, it's not a zero-sum game. When you give, it doesn't diminish what you have. It actually, multiplies it.
It does.
It's that paradox of abundance.
Yeah.
The more you give, the more you receive. Not always materially, but in terms of joy, fulfillment, a sense of purpose.
Okay, give me principle number 5.
Right. Principle number 5 is wisdom and discernment.
Ooh, interesting.
Right. Stewardship isn't about just blindly giving everything away.
Right.
It requires thoughtfulness, prayer, seeking guidance from God about how you're managing his resources.
So it's about being smart, being intentional.
Exactly.
One of your notes talk about someone trying to decide how to best use their financial resources.
Right.
And instead of just jumping into a decision, they actually took the time to pray about it, to ask for advice, and to really think about their long-term goals.
That's huge.
That's stewardship.
It really is. Stewardship needs a generous heart and a wise mind.
Yes. It's about aligning your choices with God's will, not just following your own whims or impulses. So it's about asking for advice, not being afraid to admit that you don't have all the answers, and seeking wisdom in every decision.
Absolutely. And that leads us to principle number 6, a long-term perspective.
Long-term thinking, that's a tough one.
It is.
Yeah.
But effective stewardship, it means thinking beyond what you want right now and considering the impact your choices will have down the road.
Playing the long game.
Exactly. One of your ebook chapters talked about aligning your actions with the biblical principle of sowing and reaping. What you do today, it has these ripple effects.
Yeah, you plant seeds.
Right. So it's about making choices that will not only benefit you now, but will also leave a positive impact for years to come.
Okay, that makes sense.
Think about, finances. A long-term perspective encourages saving for retirement, investing wisely, and planning ahead to benefit your kids and even grandkids.
You're setting them up for success.
Totally. It's about making choices that will really bear fruit down the road.
Okay, so we've covered 6 principles. What's next on our list?
All right, principle number 7. This one's huge. Contentment. It's the best way to combat comparison, envy, that feeling that you always need more.
I love this one. Contentment is so huge, but it's so hard, especially in our culture where everyone's telling us we need more to be happy. It's like this never-ending chase.
It is, but biblical stewardship says, wait a minute, true joy, it's not found in stuff or achievements. It's about being grateful for what you already have and then using those resources to make a real difference.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
One of your sources talked about taking the time to literally list out everything you're thankful for, big and small.
It's such a simple practice.
It is.
But it really changes your perspective. When you focus on what you have, you're not constantly craving more.
And contentment doesn't mean you can't grow and improve.
Right, of course not.
It just means you're not stuck in that cycle of wanting more, wanting more, wanting more.
You're free.
Okay, what's principle number 8? I'm ready.
Okay, it's diligence and excellence. This one reminds us that stewardship isn't about doing just enough to get by. It's about giving your best effort, no matter what you're doing.
Like doing it with all your heart.
Yes. In one of your study guides, it quotes Colossians 3:23, and it says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters.
I love that.
Right. It's about seeing everything you do, every single responsibility, as a chance to honor God.
So that changes how you approach even the mundane tasks.
Totally. So
Yeah.
if you're folding laundry, if you're leading a meeting, if you're working on your budget, do it with excellence, not because you're trying to be perfect, but because you want to do your best with what you've been given.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What about principle number 9?
Okay, this one is so important and yet so hard to achieve. Balance. It's all about finding that sweet spot between every area of your life. One of your notes used this analogy of a balanced meal.
Ooh, I like that.
Right, you need a little bit of everything to be healthy.
So we need a little bit of everything in life.
Exactly. So it's about figuring out a rhythm that allows you to honor all your different responsibilities without burning out.
Without neglecting anything.
Right. It's about finding that balance between work and rest, giving and saving, taking care of yourself and taking care of others.
It's the art of having it all without losing it all.
Ah.
Okay, that brings us to the last principle, the grand finale. What is it?
It is multiplication. This principle, it goes all the way back to the parable of the talents, and it reminds us that stewardship isn't just about preserving what you have. It's about using those resources to create more.
I love that.
Right. It's about investing what you've been given in a way that creates a return, and not just for you, but for God's kingdom.
Yeah, you're making an impact.
One of your ebook chapters had this analogy of planting a seed.
Oh, yeah.
One tiny seed, when you plant it and you take care of it, it produces a harvest.
That's beautiful.
It is. And it reminds us that we're not supposed to hoard what we have.
Right. It's meant to be shared.
We're supposed to use it to create something more, something that impacts the world around us.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about these 10 principles, all these ideas about how we can approach this concept of stewardship. But let's be honest. Life is messy.
Oh, yeah.
And even with the best intentions, sometimes it's just plain hard to live these things out every single day.
It really is. And your sources actually acknowledge that. They talk about some of the most common things that people struggle with when it comes to stewardship, those roadblocks that we all hit.
Yeah, the things that trip us up. Well, let's dive into those challenges because I think acknowledging them and understanding them is part of the journey.
Absolutely. It's about being real with ourselves. So let's start with one that I think a lot of us can relate to. It's subtle, but it's powerful. Materialism. It's everywhere.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to get caught up in that.
It really is. You're constantly being told you need more, more, more.
Buy more, do more, be more.
Exactly. But that's not what the Bible teaches.
Not even close.
Yeah.
One of the study guides you shared talked about how materialism is actually a spiritual issue, way more than just a financial one.
Oh, for sure. It's about looking for your identity, your security in things instead of in God. You're putting your trust in the wrong place.
And you're never going to be truly satisfied. Makes me think of that verse in Matthew 6 about storing up treasures in heaven, not on earth.
Ooh, that's a good one. Because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Powerful stuff. So how do we fight against materialism? Especially when it feels like it's all around us.
Well, your sources have some really practical ideas. One that I thought was super helpful is to just give yourself a waiting period before you buy anything that's not a necessity.
Oh yeah, the waiting period.
So instead of just, impulse buying, you could pause for a minute and ask yourself, do I really need this? Is this going to bring me lasting joy, or is there a better way I could be using these resources?
It's so smart.
It's a way to break that cycle of wanting everything right now.
Be more mindful about your spending.
Exactly. And sometimes, after that waiting period, you realize you didn't even want it that much anyway.
It's so true. I've also found that gratitude is a powerful antidote to materialism.
Oh, yes.
One of your notes mentioned just taking a few minutes every day to literally list out all the things you're grateful for.
Such a good habit.
It's so simple, but it really works. When you're focused on all the good things you have, you're less likely to be fixated on what you don't have.
Yeah, it shifts your whole perspective.
Contentment. Okay, so materialism is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other obstacles that people might face on their journey towards becoming good stewards?
Well, this one might seem kind of basic, but I think it trips a lot of people up. Just a lack of knowledge about finances.
Oh, yeah.
People want to be good stewards of their money, but they don't really know the basics of budgeting or saving or investing.
It's like trying to bake a cake without a recipe.
Yeah, you're probably going to end up with a mess.
Exactly. But the good news is you can learn these things.
Absolutely. And your sources have some great tips. Well, they recommend things like reading books, taking an online course, attending a workshop. You could even talk to a financial advisor.
There are so many resources out there.
So many. And it doesn't have to be super complicated. Just start small. Maybe learn how to create a basic budget or set up a savings account.
One step at a time.
Little by little, you'll start feeling more confident about managing your money. And then you can really start putting all those stewardship principles into action.
Okay, so we've got materialism and lack of knowledge. What else tends to get in the way?
Well, this one might seem obvious, but it's a big one. Short-term thinking.
Oh, yeah, that instant gratification trap.
It's tough to resist.
It is. It's like, I want that cookie now, even though I know it's not good for me.
And we live in a world where everything is instant. Fast food,
Yeah.
instant downloads.
We want it all, and we want it now.
But good stewardship, it takes a long-term perspective.
It does.
You've got to think about the consequences of your choices down the road. Like one of your sources used the example of saving for retirement.
Yeah, retirement.
Yeah.
Always thinking about retirement.
It seems so far away, right?
It does.
But saving consistently now, even if it's just a little bit, it'll make a huge difference in the future.
You're setting your future self up for success.
And that long-term thinking, it applies to so much more than just finances, too.
Oh, yeah. How we spend our time, our relationships, our health.
It's all connected. So ask yourself, am I making choices that will benefit me, not just now, but also in the years to come? Am I investing in things that are going to last?
Big questions. Another challenge that I think a lot of people face is busyness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our lives are so full,
We're all going nonstop.
and it's so easy to just get swept up in that whirlwind of activity.
And it can leave you feeling totally drained.
Exhausted. One of your briefing documents mentioned the importance of margin.
Oh, margin.
Just having that space in your life to rest, to reflect, to connect with what really matters.
Yes. It's about learning to say no to things, even good things sometimes. They're just going to drain you.
Because when we're running on empty all the time, it's hard to be good stewards of anything.
Right.
Our time, our energy, our relationships. It's like we're trying to give from an empty cup.
And that's why rest is so important.
Rest is not a luxury. It's essential.
It's not selfish either.
And your sources also emphasize the importance of delegation, sharing responsibilities.
We don't have to do it all.
We really don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best way to be a good steward is to actually let other people help.
Exactly. Let them use their gifts and talents too.
It's about teamwork, right?
Yeah.
Everyone working together, sharing the load. Okay, so we've talked about materialism, lack of knowledge, short-term thinking, busyness. Anything else?
Well, this one might be a little bit tougher to admit, but I think it's something a lot of us struggle with. Fear and insecurity.
Ooh, yeah. That voice in your head that says, what if there's not enough? What if I give too much and then I don't have enough for myself?
It can be crippling.
It really can.
And it can really hold you back from living generously.
From trusting God.
Exactly. One of your ebook chapters talked about how fear is often rooted in that scarcity mindset, the belief that there's not enough to go around.
We've got to have enough for ourselves.
But the Bible tells us something different.
Abundance.
Yes, it talks about provision.
So how do we combat that fear?
Well, you've got to fight those fear-based thoughts with truth.
Truth from the Bible.
Remind yourself that God is faithful, he always provides, and he actually wants to bless us so that we can bless others.
It's a totally different way of thinking.
And as you start to meditate on those truths, as you choose to trust God even when it's scary, you'll find that you can actually loosen your grip on your possessions a little bit
You're more free to give.
and to experience real joy because you know that you're partnering with God. You're using what you have to build his kingdom, and he will take care of you.
You will. I think another challenge, especially in our culture, is comparison.
Oh, a comparison is the thief of joy.
It really is. You're constantly bombarded with images of the perfect life, the perfect family, the perfect possessions. It makes you feel like you're not enough.
Social media definitely doesn't help.
It's a breeding ground for comparison. You see these carefully curated feeds, and it makes your own life feel, messy and inadequate.
And it can lead to all kinds of negative feelings like discontentment, envy,
Like,
shame.
yeah, you start feeling like you have to keep up, buy more stuff, achieve more, just be more.
And it's a game you can never win. There will always be someone who seemingly has more.
More than you.
Yeah.
So what's the solution?
Well, one of your notes suggested something really simple but really powerful.
What's that?
Limit your exposure to social media.
Just step away.
Yeah. Create some boundaries around how much time and energy you're giving it. And be really intentional about the kind of content you're consuming. Focus on things that build you up, inspire you, rather than things that make you feel less than.
Feed your soul. Good stuff.
Exactly. And pay attention to who you're surrounding yourself with, both online and in person.
Yeah, your people.
Are they people who lift you up? Or do they bring you down?
Choose wisely.
You've got to create an environment, both online and offline, where you can cultivate gratitude, contentment, and focus on what truly matters.
I love that. And remember, everyone is on their own unique journey.
Oh yeah, such an important reminder.
You don't have to compare your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20.
Celebrate your own wins, no matter how big or small. We're all at different stages.
And that brings us to another challenge.
Yeah.
Discontentment. If you're constantly looking at what you don't have, you're going to miss out on all the good stuff that's right in front of you.
So true. And one of your study guides talks about gratitude, not just as a fleeting feeling, but as a way of life.
A practice.
Yeah, it's about really noticing and appreciating all the good things, even the little things.
So like thanking God for your home, for food on your table, the people you love, all those little things that we take for granted.
It's about finding joy in the present moment.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about materialism, lack of knowledge, short-term thinking, busyness, fear and insecurity, comparison, and discontentment. Anything else?
Well, this one's a biggie. Overwhelm and burnout.
Oh, yeah. That feeling that you just can't do it all. It's so common in our culture. We try to do everything, be everything to everyone.
And eventually, you just crash.
You hit a wall.
You've got to set some boundaries.
Boundaries.
Learn to say no.
No is a complete sentence.
It is. Prioritize self-care.
Take care of yourself.
One of your briefing documents talks about this idea of, if you're not taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, you can't really take care of anything else.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. And that's why rest is so important. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And sometimes the best way to be a good steward of your time and energy is to actually ask for help. Delegate.
Let go of some of the control.
Yeah. You don't have to do it all
You're
yourself.
stronger together.
And there's one more challenge that we haven't talked about yet, and it's kind of a big one.
Oh, what's that?
Cultural pressures.
Ooh, yeah. We live in a world that often promotes values that are totally opposite to what the Bible teaches about stewardship.
For sure.
The pressure to be rich, to put yourself first, to define success by how much stuff you have. It's hard to resist.
It really is.
So how do we stand firm in our convictions when we're surrounded by messages that contradict them?
Well, one of your study guides talks about the importance of knowing what you believe and why.
Being rooted in truth.
Yeah. And when your values are firmly planted in the Bible, you're less likely to get swayed by all the cultural noise.
It's like having an anchor.
And it's also really helpful to surround yourself with people who share your values.
Your people.
People who are going to support you, encourage you on your journey. And when you're faced with those cultural pressures, you can be prepared to explain your choices in a way that's kind and loving. You don't have to be pushy, but you can be clear about what you believe.
And live it out authentically.
And sometimes just seeing you live out your values can inspire other people to do the same.
You're a light in the darkness.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've gone deep into biblical stewardship, The why, the how, the challenges.
And even those tricky cultural pressures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on one more thing. How stewardship plays out in different seasons of life.
Oh, that's a good one. Because it definitely looks different depending on where you're at.
So true. And your sources actually highlight some key focus areas for different stages, starting with childhood and adolescence.
That's all about laying the groundwork, building a solid foundation for the future.
Right. Those early years are so important.
They are. One of the study guides you shared talked about teaching kids about money saving, giving, being responsible.
Start them young.
Exactly. You can start small, like with a piggy bank or an allowance, and then get more complex as they get older. But it's not just about practical skills, right? It's about shaping their hearts, helping them understand that money isn't everything. True happiness comes from using what you have to help others.
Yeah, it's about generosity. And I think it's so important to just weave those stewardship principles into daily family life.
Absolutely.
You know, have conversations about generosity at the dinner table, maybe volunteer together as a family.
Kids learn by watching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They see what you're doing and they pick up on it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about young adults.
Oh, yeah, young adulthood. That's a whole new ballgame.
It is. They're making big decisions about college, their careers, relationships.
And for a lot of them, it's the first time they're managing their own finances.
Yeah, that's a big step. So what are some key things that young adults should be focusing on when it comes to stewardship?
Well, your briefing documents really emphasize the importance of establishing good financial habits early on.
Building that foundation.
Exactly. So that means learning how to budget, how to save, how to avoid debt.
And how to invest.
Right. It's about setting themselves up for financial stability in the long run. But it's also about encouraging them to be generous with their time and resources, even when they don't feel like they have a lot to give.
Because generosity isn't about how much you have, it's about the heart behind it.
Exactly. And I think this is also a really good time for young adults to find mentors, people who can offer guidance and support.
Yeah, someone who's been there, done that. So we've talked about childhood, young adulthood.
Right.
What about those midlife years?
All right, so midlife, that's when people are often hitting their stride in their careers.
Earning more responsibilities.
More opportunities to lead and make a difference, but it's also a time when life can feel really full.
Lazy.
Overwhelming. So the sources you've gathered really stress the importance of balance during this season.
Balance, that word again.
It's crucial. Balancing your career with your family, managing your finances well, and even thinking about those long-term goals like estate planning and giving back in a bigger way.
Leaving a legacy.
And it's a great time to become a mentor yourself. Share your knowledge and experience with younger people.
Passing the torch. So we've talked about a lot of different aspects of stewardship. It's not just about money. It's about our time, our talents, our relationships, our health, our intellect, our environment. It's about using everything we've been given to honor God and make a difference.
And it's a journey.
It is.
It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress.
One step at a time.
So if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by everything we've talked about today, just remember, start small.
Small steps.
Pick one area where you want to grow and just ask God for guidance. He'll be faithful to equip you every step of the way.
He will. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into biblical stewardship. If you've enjoyed this conversation, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share with your friends.
Let's spread the word about stewardship.
And for even more great content, you can join Allison Knows on Spotify and YouTube.
There's a whole community waiting for you there.
Thanks for listening to the Allison Knows podcast.
And follow Allison on Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok. We'll see you next time.